Any burning questions for the three speakers that you've just heard?
Thanks very much. Bryn McInerney, I'm part of the Service User Network and also jointly chair the Care Quality Commission's Qualities Group nationally. A couple of things really from all the three presentations that we've just had, and I think all the presentations this morning, you know, there's been a plethora of acronyms in terms of the presentations and acronyms in terms of the language, etc. And one of the reasons I came today really was to get up to speed as best I could, but also to get a feel of that. And we must realise that the language that we use is both powering and empowering and dispowering as well, really. So that's just a general point on that, really. What I was really pleased about, really, in terms of the last presentation, James, really, is actually we had the word carers in there as well. And I think, Becca, from the penultimate slide you put on, you had families and carers in that one as well. But I really do think we need to get that front-loaded, really. And that's, like I say, we've had a lot of presentations, and that's the first time it started to come out. And that was disappointing for me, really, because, again, if we look at the responsibilities that we're putting on carers nationally and locally, it's huge, really. And, again, there are people who need advocates as well, really. So it's a really important thing. Just a final point, James, really, you use the term hard to reach, and I'm not really convinced that's probably the best language that we should be using. So if I go tonight and see some of my friends from the Gypsy and Traveller community and say hello and whatever, really, and say to them, you know, I'm really sorry, but you're hard to reach, I know exactly the language that will come back to me, which is we're not hard to reach. It's about how we make the services accessible for those people who are often seldom heard, because that really means to say that we put the emphasis on us as organisations, agencies, individuals to reach out to individuals and people that sometimes actually find those formal groups quite difficult and whatever, really. So I just think in terms of the language we use, it's quite powerful again, and it's really important that we get it right.
Thank you very much. I think these are sort of reality checks for us that are really very valuable, because we all get into habits and we all get into using language and we don't even notice. Any other questions or points?
So I'm Krista Lefscombe from the National Audit Schizophrenia, and we've produced a suite of what we hope are accessible materials for service users and carers. One of the problems that we have is, apart from formal groups, we don't have any way to measure, which are, I don't know, popular or who uses the website. A part of it's the way that our website is set up is that you can't use Google Analytics for individual documents and individual pages. So I was just wondering if there's been any kind of analysis of that generally, people other than informal groups, because we can spend a lot of time developing these things, and it's a question, do people use them and are they happy with the format? Is there any kind of like formal analysis of the usability and popularity of these, so we know which ones to concentrate on?
I would say, so we are going to try to use Google Analytics or similar to look at the click rate, if you like. In terms of how we go down into more detail and look at, say, individual pages within a report, one thing that we're about to do with our participants, are the people entering the data in the hospitals and the teams, is to conduct an online poll and ask them to rate different graphs that we've included. So in the presentation, there are various different types of graph, and I've done a few presentations before where somebody in the audience has said, what does that mean in that graph? And I've thought, actually, if it's not understandable to someone, immediately, it's probably not that useful. So we'll be able to do that. And hopefully we will be able to conduct something similar with patients and carers, but it would only be feasible on a broad sense if we do it online. So we say, you've just seen this, you've downloaded it online, can you answer a few questions about which bits you liked best? In terms of doing it for people who haven't accessed the reports online, we may look to something like the UK Stroke Assembly, which is where patients and carers gather, and look at having a bit of a workshop. So it's not a fully representative sample by any means, but at least we're getting something that's potentially more than just a few answers of online questions.
Great, thanks. Any other comments or questions?
Thank you. It's Tracy Whittaker from NICOR. Just had a question for James. Could you confirm, did you say that that your report's updated on a quarterly basis? Yes. And, sorry, I've got the mic now, not letting go. And what sort of challenges have you had in terms of updating on such a regular basis?
Okay, yes. So they're quarterly, that was the answer, wasn't it?
Thank you. So one of the big challenges is streamlining the process to make sure that each time we produce a quarterly report, we can do it quicker than the time before. So a lot of it is about using the best software. So, for instance, Rob was mentioning Stata earlier. That's what we use. So we can essentially rerun everything each quarter. But so far, every quarter we've developed additional information, additional formats for the report. So we're constantly trying to improve on what we've done the time before. But over time, what we would expect is that would settle. We'd have a chosen format, and that essentially all of the coding, all of the methods for compiling something are all set out. So hard work is really at the outset and getting everything set up, and then improving, getting feedback. And for instance, the PowerPoint slides that we give to every single team took a huge amount of work to set up, but then we found lots of innovative ways of automatically drawing in graphs into a PowerPoint so that it can be done in 5 seconds rather than taking ages of putting them all in. So it requires quite a lot of research and investigation about the quickest way to do things, and deciding on a methodology and then sticking to it as much as possible, and then it's feasible on a quarterly basis.
Thanks, James. I found another microphone. Any other points or questions?
Thank you. I'm Margaret Ogden, and I'm one of the SON members, quite a new member, so this question might be a little bit naive. I'm just thinking about an illness like diabetes. And in some parts of the country, at a diabetic clinic, the patient would be asked about depression, which has made me think how that's captured. I have done a project on this in the north of England, and there will be a report and obviously statistical information that'll come out of that report. But is there any way that those kind of connecting illnesses are captured in what we've been talking about this morning? I don't know who that question's directed for. It might be a hard question. Thank you.
Shall I have a first stab? And then I don't know if you want to talk a little bit, James, and I think you're talking there about comorbidities, so two illnesses that coincide in the same patient, and how that's captured and reported, because we all live in the real world and we don't just get one thing once, in isolation. It's modelling, and I don't know if Rob also wants to come in on this. Actually, it can get quite complicated to make comparisons when you've got a lot of different conditions all doing different things in a single patient, and not all patients have the same. It's from HGRIP point of view, from NHS England's point of view, comorbidities is one of the areas they want us to look at. So patient journey is one, and then comorbidities is another, particularly with an ageing population, because as we get older, we get more and more conditions. In terms of patient-friendly reporting, you're kind of limited. My first answer is you're limited by what you were set up to do as an audit in the first place, or indeed as an inquiry. So the scope of what you're reporting is set up at the beginning and hopefully is then reflected through. Can't be drawn in at this point, but I don't know if there's any other comments from any of the other speakers or anyone around the room about comorbidities and...
So we do collect information on comorbidities. It tends to be much more of a clinical focus than the kind of focus that I think you would be thinking of. So, for instance, what conditions, from a stroke perspective, what conditions did the patient have before they had their stroke, so that you could see, okay, X% of stroke patients had hypertension before their stroke. We also collect information around mood screening and cognition. So we're getting into the treatment side, so where patients do suffer from depression or anxiety following a stroke, we're looking at the treatment side of it. But I think the next step is really to look at the impact of the stroke in our circumstance, and that isn't necessarily something that we can get directly from the clinicians who are treating the patient, because it's probably too soon for that to be identified. It's probably when the patient's at home, and it's maybe weeks or months after they've found out their diagnosis, that may be when it's the time. And what we would want to do there, hopefully in the future, is to get that information directly from patients, in terms of asking them, do you feel you have depression, etc.
Any other points or questions?
I'm a clinical lead for falls and fracture audit at the college. The general one really is where you feel things are in terms of the balance between written reports, which sort of going back 7 or 8 years were very, very solidly, reliably reflected the facts. They're very good from that point of view, but they're a bit turgid unnecessarily for that reason. I just wonder where you feel the balance is now between short reports and sort of web-based appendices.
I think that's a really... Should I come to the front because I'm behind everybody, aren't I? I think that's a really valid question, and in fact it was on my list of ones I would have asked if there'd been a longer silence. I think we're very much in a transition period. We have projects, steaming ahead, like Stroke with their quarterly online reporting, and we know that to effect change, those who are delivering services particularly want really timely data that they can believe and track changes in as near real time as possible when they try to make changes to their services. So I think this is up for debate, and to be honest, this is the sort of thing this is perfect transition material for me to the last section of the talk, actually, because this is the sort of topic that I think we could really tackle as a community and say, well, what is our attitude? Is the national audit report of the olden days, that's a paper-based report on its way out, does it have a value? Is it something we want additional to more real-time reporting? For what audience at what time? I think this is an open debate. I think we can all influence the agenda moving forward. So I'll go back, if that's okay, and listen. If there's any more questions, I'm going to go back and finish my slides and take us through the last 15 minutes. Any other questions for the speakers? Any last questions?
You start with number of stroke patients and then you change them to percentage. What purpose does that serve?
So what we've decided to do is in our reporting is to provide numbers and percentages. So in our full report, we would give the numbers as well as the percentages. So if anyone wanted to go back and do any calculations themselves using the data, they would be able to. They could see all of the numbers there.